Hey guys, it's me, Jacob Sanders, and this is the second video in my new series on studying Python. I've got all of my repos set up, I've got my website to help me read source code set up, and I'm basically just going through the grind of reading all of these different code bases, and it is definitely a grind. Um, but keeping an open mind, and I have some fundamental reasons that I believe that this is going to be a productive thing for me to do, even though there's always a healthy amount of doubt within myself too, um, because you just don't know, and you don't want to waste your time in life because it's so precious, but at the same time, you have to make decisions and take risks. And so, that's kind of what this is reading all of these different code bases going to pay off? Is reading it in the way that I am reading it going to pay off? I really can't answer that specifically, but I will tell you at least one of the principles or axioms why I believe it is a decent strategy uh, to take for some of my goals. So one of the main things that I want to put out there is that I'm really interested in synthesizing something new, and I'm interested in doing something kind of novel. Um, and I recognize that my theory about how humans create new things and kind of like push boundaries or find new edges or optimize things and uncover new efficiency is all the same fundamentally. It's about them taking a new systematic approach to something. And new is always a relative thing, it's in flux. Something can only really be new for a certain period of time, and after it becomes sort of mainstream and enough people are doing it, it transitions from being new to being more of like a mature part of the entire ecosystem. A good example is like chess. If you look at that, there was a time period where players didn't study with chess engines, if you go back far enough, because they didn't exist. But you see new class of players come out of the woodworks because their systematic approach to learning the game uses something different. And so that's just one example, but basically it applies to a lot of different things. Um, and so my thesis, I guess here, or my theory, is that there are a lot of computer programmers, but there aren't that many that would do what I'm trying to do here. Um, there's a lot of code to get through here, and I think most people would just be completely overwhelmed with the. I think they would just be totally put off by the fact that there's just like it's a disorganized mess. It's like, what are you trying to do? Most people wouldn't want to spend an entire month or 2 months or whatever just consuming information kind of for the sake of it. Um, Especially information that doesn't seem that directed or like a goal, right? Um, but I have, you know, my goals, like I said, are not quite the same. I really want to comprehend things deeper, and I realize that to do that, this is going to give me a unique perspective, right? And again, that stems from the entire like point that I was making before, like your perspective, your innovation, and your thoughts are all derivative of the system of existence that you're really doing. I would call it the systematic approach you have, right? And so one person's systematic approach might be to read code, like an hour each day. Another person's systematic approach might be to read documentation. Another person might be like, I want to build apps. Someone might be a weird ratio of all three. There's just all these different numerical permutations. One person might be like, I just do research papers on it. I'm studying in school, you know. So anyways, what I'm trying to get at is whether or not you know it, you have a systematic approach. It might not be rigorous, it might be very, very lax and sort of chill, but it's still a systematic approach. Systematically, you are doing certain actions every day. And if you actually measure that, you know, for like years, you start to realize it's totally deterministic and derivative the way you see the world based on the systematic approach and like decision making and patterns that you have going on every day. And so it's pretty obvious that I'm going to start thinking about programming in a way that is congruent with having read so many of these different code bases. I can't predict what that will be. I just predict that it will occur at some sort of transition. The transition might end up being quite subtle, you know. A lot of the time, you know, the transformation might be like not as significant as you would think. You know, and that's I think why a lot of people are put off of these type of things, because the cost benefit analysis is it's totally unknown. You really cannot predict where the curve of diminishing returns begins, right? That's probably where a lot of people would put this, is like way too deep into the realm of diminishing returns. And I honestly can say that that is a pretty decent, skepticism to have about it. But, I'm going to take the risk out here and pretty much do it, or do as much of it as I want until I pivot to something else, which I often do. But yeah, anyways, so seems pretty interesting. I mentioned the repos that I'm reading last video, and I did a little bit of all of them. I think I'm probably only going to get a little bit into all of them each day, and I might pivot where I start going a little bit deeper into specific ones. But I really like the approach of just reading like 70 kilobytes of this one, 70 kilobytes of this one, 70 kilobytes, and just doing a huge spread, like a buffet. And one thing I really like about that is it really just deconstructs the patterns, right? Because one thing I've noticed is like when you get familiar with a code base, it can get easier to read it, mostly because the code base is got its own patterns within it, right? The authors do it this specific way, right? It doesn't mean that that's the only way you can do it. It just means that they chose to do it that way, and they chose to be consistent with it. But when you move to a new code base, all of the decisions start to be potentially different or the same, right? It's like, and so when you switch from one code base to the next, you have a more realistic experience of what code actually is. Code doesn't live in these little pockets that have consistent patterns. Code is this huge distributed chaotic mess. And I think this is why people really avoid this type of overload, because it becomes very difficult. It's a lot harder to read all these different patterns. It's just more load, more patterns, more information, right? But in the end, if you do it the way that I'm sort of going about it, you end up seeing what are the patterns on top of all the code bases, right? And you see what's unique about different code bases. Because you're like, all right, I see. This person chose this style. I wonder how it worked out for them. This project chose this style. These projects have the exact same style, or they did this one thing in a very, very similar way. Right? And so anyways, that's pretty much it. There's not too much of an update. Just 5 more hours deep into reading. And I think if you go back to my JavaScript series, which was potentially going to go to 100 days, but I just decided I wanted to start writing an app again that I had been planning on doing for a while. That had actually been the whole point of doing that exercise was to be able to make that app and other apps. this one is not nearly as inspired. Like, I'm just reading Python code again because I want to, because I feel the mathematical need, you know, it's similar. I think that making apps too many times has diminishing returns for me. Like, I need to go back to consuming people's work that might be years ahead of me, right? I'm gonna just end up repeating my own bullshit patterns, excuse me, um, for forever, and I'm gonna miss out on there's some people that might be wildly better at coding or have some sort of perspective and pattern that is like really useful, some really good insight, and I just never have it because I just recycle my own stuff. This is what's interesting to me is I think that a lot of developers, like open source developers, probably end up being this is just a guess, but I would assume that they end up being um, sort of I don't want to use the word stranded, but they opt to stay within small little bounds. Like they're comfortable contributing to this project, but they don't wiggle out much. It just seems like I feel like it would be rare for a person to be, and I'm not really that interested in contributing to a lot of these projects because I mean maybe eventually. I'm more so interested in studying them. What are these people doing? Why are they doing it? And yeah, so man, what was I feel like there was some something I was talking about and addressing in the middle of that. Uh, but yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how like I'll have more to say about this. Like I said during the JavaScript experiment or exercise, towards the end, I started to feel really, really faster at comprehending the patterns. And I was juggling a bunch of different repos then too. Not as many, but like close. Maybe more like 5 or 6. And then I kind of stayed on one, which was the library desktop one. I spent a lot of time reading that one, and I think I almost may have gotten through it once. It was about 2.2 megabytes or something like that. Maybe like 2.9. I can't remember. But anyways, so I believe that I'll probably have a lot better observations deeper down into this. So it'll be interesting. But I'm hoping that things will click pretty hard, and you know So, anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys. Uh, remember to focus on your own evolution and like growth and whatnot, right? Don't get consumed in other people's stories. You know, um, social media is like bad for 99% of people, and it's like really good for like 1%. The 1% that collect all the attention on social media have like these super privileged, wealthy lives. I don't really like using the word privileged, but they definitely get a whole lot of financial, you know. And so this is me saying, don't be duped by my channel or any channel really. Um, you know, don't kid yourself. Like, you're not helping yourself. You're probably not helping yourself that much if you're consuming other people's content all the time. I say that, but I just talked about reading a bunch of other people's code, which is sort of like content, but it's a type of content which is much more constructive for my growth, right? There's a whole lot of content out there that doesn't help me improve at all, but wants my attention as much as it possibly can for profit, for its own profit, right? So, anyways, make sure you you like monitor yourself and try and stay on track. And yeah, if you have anything to mention or like some questions or something, just that's what the comments are for. So see you guys.